Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Holy Ourselves podcast, a podcast about becoming more fully ourselves before God, ourselves, and others in the midst of this crazy world. And you can support this podcast by becoming a patron, going to patreon.com/Holy Ourselves. There's bonus episodes, there's bonus interviews, drafts of things that I've been working on. Thank you to the patrons, because the last month I've been a little bit wonky because I've been finishing my book. But today I am joined by Rachel Dowda again. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Josh. So happy to be here in the flesh with you. Same room this time.
We get to be in the same. Yeah. For anyone on YouTube, sorry, there's no video today. It has been a wild week. God, I've had no floor in my house. Currently still have no bathroom. This is where our community is being real community for Christian. We've been like jumping from house to house. And then there was an episode that was supposed to happen this week, and sadly it didn't get to happen. So then Rachel and I was like, Rachel, you want to come on, do this episode? We've been talking about doing this episode for a minute.
Yeah, I asked if we could do this topic a while ago. And so when you asked me if I wanted to this week, I was like, absolutely.
Yeah, we're going to talk about purity culture.
Ooh, I feel like we need like the horror movie music.
Oh,
and
yes.
You know.
Oh, my gosh. And we just had church tonight and then went out to dinner. And so we're back. And just because of time, we're just not doing a video.
No.
And that's totally fine. But happy Pentecost Sunday, everyone. Yeah, you didn't bring your I loved the joke you made. You didn't bring your flags.
I know. I grew up super charismatic, and Pentecost Sunday was like speaking in tongues, flags of all the nations, and all the things. That was like the biggest Sunday of the year, I think.
Yeah.
In like a charismatic church.
And then in Baptist world, it just didn't exist growing up for me. Like I didn't even realize that there was a Pentecost Sunday into it. But I loved getting to have, we had like 5 different languages spoken.
Yeah, it was really special.
It was really cool. So from people around our community that spoke different languages. So here we were. How are you, Rachel?
I'm happy to be here. It's a crazy time. Crazy time in this world to be a therapist.
Oh my gosh.
For sure.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. It's a crazy moment of life. But I'm so glad you're willing to be here for this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are talking about purity culture. What inspired you to want to talk about this?
I think with what's going on in politics, a lot of these topics that were really big for a while when I was younger are getting popular again, especially with like gender roles in marriage. And like you're just seeing a lot coming back up. There's a YouTube channel called Fundy Fridays, and they do a lot of like looking into like different fundamentalism topics and stuff, and I really enjoy it. And I was watching one on purity culture, and it was interesting how it tied into the AIDS epidemic, and I didn't know that. And so learning more about that, I asked if we can do it and kind of examining how it affected someone who was gay and lesbian differently, and even us coming out at different ages. Much more later in life. You were born knowing, and just I thought it might be interesting just to talk about.
Yeah, because there's so many pieces to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, having just written the book, first draft, everyone, but it was so fun. You need to go to my Instagram if you haven't. Rachel helped me take a picture of like announcing almost like I had a baby because it was 9 months.
Your book baby.
Of writing my book baby. Her name will be released soon.
Girl dad.
Yes. It was really interesting, even just for that book, to explore the ways that I don't get to go into it as much as I would probably like to. It could be a book in and of itself of how purity culture impacts queer people specifically. Because a lot of it gets put on the general conversation, and that's worth noting. But there really are some unique ways.
And in purity culture, even when it was taught in schools, which it wasn't supposed to be religious in schools, but it definitely had those undertones, it felt very homophobic, even if it wasn't said outright.
Yeah.
And I'm sure even those messages played a part in me coming out later in life.
Yeah.
Even if it was more of like a subconscious thing.
Did you ever read Jesus and John Wayne?
I've picked through it, but a lot of the information I've like read or watched elsewhere.
Yeah. I was really, so I haven't finished it either because I started it on a road trip and then I was like, I need to like sit down and actually read through this.
Pay attention.
Yeah. But from what I was listening to on my road trip, I was surprised by how much reference she actually makes to the viewpoint of the evangelical church on homosexuality and how that played into, like, because so much of it ties into this idea of masculinity and homosexuality and sexuality and purity culture. All of it gets wrapped together.
Yeah. Well, like when the moral majority, and I don't know enough about it to really explain it, but like to look into like when that was going on with Jerry Falwell, I think, of Liberty, like that's really when Christianity like really became big in politics and the voting bloc, and it really shifted a lot of the education and turned into abstinence based. And then, you know, the AIDS epidemic, like they really had a big influence on the times. Even with like voting on the issues of like, I remember growing up, my parents didn't really care about much else in politics except no gay marriage and no abortion.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter anything else about the person running for president. It was just those topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Which sadly, not much has changed in that way. And so I think the only thing that's really changed is now a lot of it has also gotten wrapped up into immigration.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like those two things still stand really, really, really staunchly, especially within the purity culture piece.
For sure.
I guess for anyone who has never heard of the term purity culture, in case you like, maybe you're just like, what is this? I'll try and see if I can give a definition. Okay. I'd love to see what
I actually met someone recently that didn't know what it was, and I was like, what was it like to grow up without that?
Right.
That must have been amazing.
Because you never heard, I want to clarify, you never heard that term. I feel like that's a term kind of like conversion therapy. Like no one who supported it called it that.
In the moment.
But it's been a term that's come about since then and more to analyze it. But purity culture was this general increase of understanding that the answer to sexual like sexual ethics, or just like trying like the church's answer to a lot of the problems around pregnancy and STDs and just infidelity, all of this stuff was abstinence until marriage. That was like the biggest push, that like, rather than teaching about condoms, rather than teaching about safe sex, that we just needed to teach abstinence specifically. And that was the only 100% guaranteed way to not get STDs, to not get pregnant. It was taught to school. It was taught all of that. And then a lot of it gets also wrapped up into the views of men's responsibility and sexuality versus women's. Women were meant to guard their brothers, right?
Yeah.
You can say more. I'm trying to think of like, how do you explain it? How did you explain it to the person?
So actually just sent them the link to the video I watched because I felt so big, because purity culture was more than just like abstinence-based education. It involved like modesty and like not causing men to stumble. But it also was, especially in the book True Love Waits, which was like huge at the time, it even went as far as like, if you kiss someone who's not your husband, you're cheating on your future husband with that person, or you're stealing someone else's future husband. Like it was so like I remember this book started and he was like 21 years old and he wrote it, and he had a dream where like he was getting married, and as he was getting married, he looked in at the altar, all the people that she had previously been with and all the people that he had previously been with were there. And it was also taught like, when you have sex with someone, you're also having sex with everyone they've had sex with. And so it was just really like a lot of pressure, a lot of weird analogies. Like every time you have sex, it's like pulling a flower petal off and you're going to give your husband a naked rose, or like, gluing two pieces of paper together. If you pull them apart, the paper is destroyed. So it was very shame-based, very much like, fear induced. And also is really big with the promise of, if you do stay pure, God is going to bless you with the best sex life ever. And I think that's even where you get like the weird sermons where men are like, my hot wife, like it just was so cringy. I remember listening to those. Almost like a woman's virginity is the reward a man gets, and God is going to bless them with awesome sex. And then they go, if they do wait, first night, you're married, you have sex. It's like that shame doesn't disappear. You don't have education, and it doesn't always work out the way
Yeah,
it's
I'm,
promised. My
I'm,
parents had their first kiss on the wedding altar.
that is crazy.
They like never dated.
Yeah.
And my dad's like, I wouldn't do that again. Like, obviously, he would marry my mom again, but he wouldn't recommend somebody going about, like, don't date, just meet and get engaged and married.
Yeah. Which I think what is often complex for it from people who, like, are Christian or maybe, like, still hold to a lot of, like, the Christian beliefs is I'm sure that there's some people listening and you kind of go, well, what's wrong with that? Like, isn't the Bible supposed to teach, like, no sex until marriage? And we can, like, talk about that. But what I think is really important is, like, even with that teaching, the problem is it really didn't take into account that, yes, you can tell people don't have sex, but that's not always going to stop them from doing it. And then on top of it, if you're never, like, let's just take the abstinence thing, because you're right, it's much more complex than just
abstinence,
that.
there's nothing wrong with that. But it was the shame that really created that trauma people carrying.
I remember the rose thing that you were talking about. And I remember as someone who, like, had slept with people in high school, just, like, feeling it. And then, like,
it's very objectifying.
Well, and it also, like, it almost had this idea that, like, your worth couldn't be regained or anything. Like, it was, like, deteriorated
then
from
it had,
it.
like, purity balls, and you pledge your purity to your dad. So there's a lot of interesting things going on.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing wrong with waiting till marriage. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But it was all of, like, the shame added on.
Yeah, because I think the complexity then when you get to marriage and, like, your parents' situation is, I've also run into people who, when you don't really talk about sex, you don't kind of allow even at least just conversation beforehand, there is such a thing as sexual compatibility.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it. And the amount of marriages that has become an issue later on because it was never addressed beforehand. But then also, like, the risky behavior. I am just, as a kid who came out in high school, maybe middle school technically, and then as I started having sex, I mean, I think I knew about condoms, but, like, no one was really having that conversation with me. It is a wonder I did not get HIV. Like, it is crazy because so much of the AIDS crisis really played in and elevated as a factor within the purity culture. It was major. We were talking about that. Like, we can dive into it, but it was so enwrapped in, like, we'll see the AIDS epidemic. This is what God was talking about in Romans 1, that you're getting the punishment, due within your body. And it created that same fear and that same shame. And I wrote about this in the book. Like, I wrote about the experience of my first time getting tested by myself. And I didn't feel I could tell anyone because I went to a Planned Parenthood, and God forbid in an evangelical world going to Planned Parenthood. But I was thinking over, I'm not going to say it well and, like, state it perfectly, but Bridget Eileen's book, Heavy Burdens, I thought it was really fascinating how she framed the Protestant Reformation of Martin Luther King as a sex revolution. And as kind of one of the first sex revolutions, because it was pushing back against the understanding of the Catholic Church that even if you were having sex in marriage, there was, like, a dirtiness to it, that celibacy was, like, the ideal perfect form. And so the Protestant Reformation initially was actually pushing against that, to say, no, there's, like, goodness in having sex. There's goodness in, like, these kinds of relationships. And then as it was taken from there, I think it's interesting that you have this kind of movement that happened in church that then, with purity culture and, like, the moral majority and all of these things, how it went from there. I was trying to see what I would draw from that, but I don't know. It just came to mind.
Yeah.
As I was, like, going through it. So one of the things we were going to talk about was, like, the differences, because I came out as a teenager and you were not. So what was it like for you in high school, or, like, going through that, not out, maybe not even out to yourself?
Yeah. So I grew up, like, literally probably was in church, I don't know, a week after, like, however fast my mom could show up. And I had pretty severe OCD that was very much contamination. And so I was very like, I was afraid that I'd get pregnant from a toilet seat. Like, talk about not being informed. Or like catch HIV by stepping on the ground where someone, like, it just was like also crazy times of growing up in the 90s too.
Yeah.
And then, you know, modesty was really big. Like, before you leave the house, hands above your head. Is your stomach showing? Yes. Okay, change your shirt. You know, just a lot of that. But then once in middle school, going through the books, like every young woman's battle, and then the boys would go in a different room at every man's battle, you know, all of that. And one thing I remember that it's really, really hit hard, and I think it was one of the reasons why I didn't realize I was gay sooner, is being taught like men are like physical and visual creatures. And they always use the word creatures, which made it feel very like animal. And then women are much more emotional, and they're not like sexual beings. And so when I wasn't like attracted to men, I was like, oh, that makes sense. I'm not a sexual being. Women don't feel that way. And so I just thought like all girls feel like aren't attracted to men. And also I think there was a little bit of like pride in how great I was at not lusting after men.
Look how holy I am.
My friends were like confessing that they were like lusting after boys. And I was like, I must be like ultra Christian because I actually find them disgusting. Like, I have no desire to kiss Brad. Like, ew.
My friend Grant Hartley, who was a co-host on Live Outside B, he had the same exact experience, and he was like, wow, I'm amazing at being pure, not realizing that it was just homosexuality.
Yeah. And then the older I got, I was like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to get married someday, and that feels disgusting. And I used to think like, I wish I could just live with my best friend and we could raise a kid together, and that could just be my life. And now I want to be like, oh, Rach, you could do that.
You could.
Like, but at the time I didn't even know like a lesbian. Like, I heard of gay men, but it was very much like almost caricatures. Like, they always were like very like, you know, just like the stereotypical gay man in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't even know, like, probably never even heard the word lesbian before. And so I think being told over and over, like, you're not a sexual person, like women don't have those kind of feelings like men do. Like, I just was really clueless, and I didn't realize partly because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because even I feel like back then, if there even were gay characters on TV, they were never explicitly stated that they were gay.
Maybe like Will and Grace.
That was like the most radical first
We didn't
experience.
even really watch secular
and if you
TV,
notice,
so
Will and Grace never once says HIV. Never once says AIDS. It was one of the most critical things, that LGBTQ. But that was because they were trying to like move away from the stigma. Like there's a lot of complex history there. But I think back now to watching like The Father of the Bride, The Wedding Planner. Franck, obviously gay, but like in your little kid mind, no idea. No. And then rewatching it, I'm like, oh, you know, like there's these that was like, I feel like what you got. So that was basically what you got with gay men. And it was mostly just their effeminacy that.
Yeah, they were always very feminine.
Yes.
Men.
And then, but I think the hard part with lesbian portrayal would be like, they would just come off as a tomboy.
Yeah. Or like roommates, you know.
Or roommates.
Like, looking back, we had lesbian neighbors. And like, I remember being told like, oh, there's two women to live together, but it never clicked that it was anything more than just like two women that lived together.
Yeah.
And I think it's because my parents didn't have queer friends. We didn't have anyone around us that was. And if we did, the goal would only be friendship so they could get saved. Like, it was crazy where I did not know a single like queer woman. You know, of course, I'm sure I met them, but I wasn't aware of them until I was an adult.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh.
And I also don't think they were in media at the time. Like in the 90s and 2000s?
I'm trying to think of like a example of it. And I don't watch the listeners, if you think of something like early 90s or like 90s 2000. Again, I think Will and Grace, like when you get Rosie O'Donnell.
Yeah, maybe Ellen. I don't know when she started.
Ellen.
That probably was like the only.
Well, because when Ellen came out on her show, that was a big deal.
I wonder when that was. What year that was?
That was. Let's look it up really quickly.
I mean, not like I was watching Ellen, but still.
Because because that was a big deal. Because like then I remember right like after that, she came on Will and Grace. When did I'm Googling it, everyone. When did Ellen come out? She came out in 1997.
Okay. So I was 7 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, she came out as part of a 2-part episode of her ABC sitcom. The puppy episode is apparently what it was called.
One thing that I think is really funny is, I grew up going to like church camp, Acquire the Fire. If any of you all were involved in Teen Mania and watched that documentary.
I did one of my multiple giving my life to Christ at Acquire the Fire because I never could be sure I was saved because I was gay.
Oh, yeah.
So like gave my life to Christ again and again, like one of those things. Yeah.
But we, my youth group would always go. And I remember, and I hope she listens to this because I love this girl now. She's amazing. And so many of my friends from high school are queer. And we all came out as adults. But we would stay in a hotel before the Acquire the Fire conference, and we all had to like share beds with each other, and somebody brought a girl. Oh, she was a sister of one of the boys that usually came, and she was bi, and it was like scandalous. And I remember like I was going to be the one to share a bed with her. And I was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Like, what if I accidentally seduce her? Love that 15-year-old Rachel was so confident in herself that I would actually do that to this girl. I think I was just projecting. But I didn't like want to sleep next to her because I needed to protect her the same way I was almost taught, like I need to protect my brothers in Christ. Yeah. But that was, I think, the only like queer person I knew. I told her that story when we were adults and she laughed so hard.
I love that.
She's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people don't normally equate them, but they definitely are related, is that purity culture arose around the same time as the ex-gay movement.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Because the first ex-gay ministry opened in 1972. Mm-hmm. Maybe one, but like 71, 72. 2 to 3 years after Stonewall, which I don't think is a coincidence. There was never an ex-gay ministry before that. There's a book that I quote in my book called The Returns of Love. Mm-hmm. It was written by these 2 homosexual Christians. Right before that, it was like 1970. And while they are very like traditional sexual ethic, they're not necessarily coming at it from like a conversion therapy mindset, which is really fascinating because people have always assumed, I think whereas purity culture, we've understood it as a movement, conversion therapy, we've always assumed like, oh, the idea of like gay people have to change has always been the viewpoint of the church, and it actually was not really. That was a much more psychological development that happened.
Do you feel that gay people instead would just be like, would become like nuns or just like just like not get married?
Yeah. So I'm not equipped to talk about this, or I'm not equipped to like analyze it, but there is a whole fascinating thing. I need to have like us talk to Eve Tushnet because I feel like she's like the person, and even she'll be like, we don't know actually what happened. Early in the church, most of the time, queer people would become nuns and they would become priests, and because it was often the space that most embodied you not getting it, or maybe you would get married, but there was a long history in Christianity of spiritual friendships, of these kind of brother sibling making ceremonies that even if people who were married to a person of the opposite sex would still make with their same sex friend. And then they would even be buried with that friend, sometimes more than their spouse. And some people, you can equate like, where was this like a secret lover thing? Probably there are cases of that, but there were many who really saw it as a spiritual friendship thing. Yeah. And Eve has really equated to, if you notice, this is the part that we don't know. We don't know why that died off. When like the tradition of spiritual friendships died off, why did it die off? Yeah. And why did this kind of route? Because you can see threads of the loss of spiritual friendships and the loss of like some of the routes that queer people had available to them, and then the rise of the queer community. Yeah. Because ultimately then you had lost the ways that you could. Now that wasn't the route everyone took.
Because if you became a nun or a priest, you'd have community and you'd live together and you
Yeah. And you would have the like things.
A family.
You would have family. There were other people, you saw a lot of queer people in piracy, and a lot of these other things. Polari, the language, came from piracy because a lot of queer people were in that. So there were definitely like other fringes. It wasn't just like the clergy and monasteries, but within the church, that was a very common thing. Now, then you have, so for some reason, spiritual friendships die. Don't understand why. But then you get a gap. Queer people start creating much more overtly their own communities. and then there was a long history of, even in the traditional church, queer people would be open, but there wasn't a necessity to change your attractions. Maybe there was a requirement of celibacy. Maybe there was like something of that kind, but there was often like spiritual friendships were very common, all of those things. What's fascinating about the rise of conversion therapy specifically is it really tied into the purity culture understanding of fixing it, of fixing homosexuality, and the veins between, because who became a very big proponent of conversion therapy? Dr. James Dobson, who also was a very big person in the purity movement, a purity culture movement. So they really tie in together. And I do think that two big proponents of it on the homosexuality side were Stonewall and the AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
Like the two, I think the movement was already happening pre-AIDS, but I think AIDS really gave it that like oomph of like, see, that's where that leads to.
Well, it gave them a reason to vilify
yes,
queer people. Because I didn't know this, but in your book I learned that originally it wasn't called HIV or AIDS. What was the original name?
GRID. Gay, what am I going to say? Gay something immune disease.
Yeah, it was like the gay disease.
Gay-related immune disease or something.
Which now you've vilified an entire group of people, which I feel like never went away.
No, it's never gone away, even though they changed the name. And that was because a lot of that came from they thought it was a gay cancer.
Yeah.
And then when they realized it wasn't, the name still stuck for a while until people got them to. That's why it's HIV, because it's human immunity or something virus. Because they really wanted to emphasize anyone can get this.
Yeah.
Like anyone can get it. And the Ronald Reagan administration really didn't start addressing it until it started affecting straight people.
Which is really sad.
Yeah. Because I think what it is, Ronald Reagan didn't actually say the word HIV himself. God, I can't even remember how far into his administration. But his Surgeon General wanted to address it. And people... Keith tells the story really well of how when the Surgeon General for Ronald Reagan was chosen, everyone thought he was going to make abortion his like objective, but then he ended up making HIV his thing of like actually addressing it, which is what people had wanted for a long time, like the queer community had wanted, but it was a surprising ally that they had found, because he had been pushing for a while to address it, but the Reagan administration had said no.
I loved when I learned, how LGBTQ got the L on the front. I thought that was such like a beautiful piece of history that made me really proud to be a lesbian.
Because lesbians took care of gay men in that, because it's like you didn't really have it. And it's sad to see so many of the different ways that a lot of these things continue into our life, today. We're going to talk about this later on. I'm probably going to have a guest or two on to talk specifically about some of these things. But many listeners, you might know, Alan Chambers was recently arrested, and Alan Chambers was the last president of Exodus International, the largest gay or ex-gay movement or organization, and then he closed it. And interestingly, then became affirming. And I served on a panel with him once or twice. I knew him when I was a kid, and it was interesting to serve on a panel with him when he was like one of the affirming voices and I was one of the traditional voices. And I was like, I was a teen in this ministry that you ran, and that was a lot to process. Like I never had a bad experience with him. He was arrested for soliciting a minor recently. But what I think is really fascinating is you have this situation, and then on a very different situation, you have another one that some of you may know, may not. So just for context, Sam Albury, who wrote Is God Anti-Gay? He is a pastor who would describe himself as same-sex attracted. And originally all we heard was he was fired from his job in Tennessee for being in a relationship with a man. Now, automatically the question was this like a hypocrisy? Because he was a very traditional believing, like was committed to celibacy, didn't even use gay language.
Oh, wow.
Like nothing, like he didn't necessarily go that. He was not mean towards like people like myself who used gay language and like side B kind of people. I never experienced him like being really hostile towards that, like some others like Christopher Yuan or Rosario Butterfield, but he definitely wasn't of the same belief on identity and culture, and some of that is side B. But when there was like a lot of questions of, oh, is this like hypocrisy? Was he secretly having a relationship with a man while he was preaching all of this other stuff? A lot of affirming people started attacking it. And then, but then it's now come to look like, first of all, we know that the relationship was before he became a pastor. And it's looking like we're, again, everyone, this is a developing story because God forbid a church actually give us information, though also it's Sam's life. So I don't want necessarily for his life to be broadcast.
Yeah.
But it's seeming like the relationship was not sexual. And so it's becoming looking like a less of a hypocrisy story and maybe more of a purity culture kind of situation where like, because what I think is so funny, one of the other effects that I saw, this is where I'm kind of going with all of this for context. I know that was a long thing. On the one side, you have conservatives kind of going after the Alan Chambers thing, going, see, this is what happens when people go affirming or going side B as they then become pedophiles, whatever. And then, like Christopher Yuan said that kind of crap now. And then you've had like probably more, not really affirming voices, but like hostile, non-Christian LGBT voices really criticizing, though some affirming people, like kind of criticizing Sam Albury as like, see, he's hypocritical, like this doesn't work, when now we have information kind of speaking maybe a little too soon. But I think what's fascinating on the Sam Albury side of things is that in purity culture, there was this dual side that I've always tried to figure it out, because on one side, they would always like brush it under the rug about sexual abuse. You know, like a pastor would.
What were you wearing?
Yeah, it was always the one, like God, he would have a sexual affair with a woman in the church, which is not just a sexual affair, that is spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
Then they would like bring him before and he'd repent, and then they would, you know, there's so many stories of like it just getting brushed under a rug, or maybe he would just get removed and no one would know.
Yeah, just transferred to a different church.
Yeah, but then queer people get removed very publicly for kissing someone of the same sex. In this case, apparently maybe having a relationship before
or
ever
just
getting on
saying
staff.
that's something they deal with and not even acting on it. Some
Yes.
places.
The amount of queer people I have known who tried to be open and honest, like they were in a traditional church, they maybe had one experience, they talked about it, they maybe kissed someone, God forbid, they tell their church, and then they were fired.
Yeah.
And so I think this like inequality of like brushing under the rug the abuse of straight men, while then queer people getting like really bulldozed. And again, I don't know the whole situation of Sam Albury. We don't actually know, but it's seeming more like this. Yeah. And it's sad to see kind of how all of this stuff still stays in our thing. And then also the ways that these two guys, like the Alan Chambers situation, which is a much different situation than obviously Sam's, how we build complete cases about frameworks, like conservatives saying, oh, Alan Chambers proves that affirming and side B theology are both like lead to pedophilia. And then like this one, like, see this as hypocritical, rather than like actually addressing the person. Yeah. All right. I'm off of my stool now. You can talk.
No, you're good. I agree. And I think when, not talking about, I mean, yes, you should be able to please confess your struggles with people. But when you're talking about queer people just like sharing at church, being afraid to even be vulnerable, it just keeps people from not coming out sooner and keeps growing shame. I mean, I remember even when I like realized I was queer, I was so afraid if I would like, be forced to not volunteer at our church anymore. And I remember I like asked Sarah Claire, who's on staff, and when she told me like, oh, it wouldn't change anything, like the relief, because it was like, do I get my community or do I get to be queer? And so, the idea that people can't be honest, that shame, like that's a scary place to be, and it can be a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, because it's like rather than operating by discipline, it's that ability to say, Like, let's say someone acts outside of their ethics, or granted, again, abuse is like a different thing.
Yeah. Not talking about abuse. We're talking about like,
we're talking about like
about who you're attracted to,
who you're talking about, you're trying to like doing something, you know, non-illegal.
Yeah.
Rather than automatically going to discipline, I think what purity culture really gets wrong is like not making space to just ask like, hey, tell me about what happened with
There's
you.
no curiosity.
There's none. Because everything is built on shame.
Yeah.
Everything's built on judgment, on don't do that. And you believe, this is, okay, everyone, we're just getting into my promotion of my book. No, I'm joking. Well, because I think the biggest thing for me that I've been like trying to do with this like spiritual formation work is so much of the church has believed that you get people to change their behavior by telling them what's bad.
Yeah. And
giving them enough information. That information is what will transform people. But it doesn't always matter about information, as long as the burdens that I carry and the fears that I carry and all of those still exist. Sometimes I'm going to go against the information that exists there.
Yeah. And I think it's really dangerous when purity becomes so black and white, when it's tied to like someone's like value. Like, oh, if you have sex before marriage, you're now a ripped up piece of paper, or chewed up piece of gum, or a flower with no petals. You know, like you're not just talking about like, you know, choices lead to consequences. Like that is like a valid thing to talk through. Like the safest way to not get pregnant before marriage, be abstinent. Like that is not like a huge moral thing. But when it's like you lost your value because of this, like that creates a lot of harm. And I remember even learning like hearing people say like, and if you've been raped or sexually assaulted, God could also forgive you and restore your virginity. And it's like, why is that even phrased like that? Like it creates so much shame. And that really can lead to people being like, well, you know, what's the point anymore?
Yeah.
I'm just going to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
You know, instead of curiosity, instead of like not tying like you've lost your worth to the person. You know, it's nothing wrong with having values. And, you know, our values are different. It's nothing wrong with having values, but when it all of a sudden like you're worth less as a person, like that's really harmful.
Well, because even also when you make right behavior the only objective, you don't actually care how you arrive there. Because let's take someone who actually follows through with like purity culture values. Like I know plenty of people who never kissed anyone before their spouse, never had sex with anyone. I know celibate gay Christians who've never held hands with another person of the same sex. Like in all terms, they have arrived and done everything right. And I'm not going to say every single person, but the majority of those same people are people that they did so through shame. They did so through also caring that then now they have to work through. Because ultimately, purity culture did not care about the way you saw yourself. Like there were definitely, I definitely experienced some messages in purity culture which were like, God loves you. But then you're on top of it, you're also hearing your value is tied to whether you've had sex or, you know, like, so.
Or like Christ is in the bedroom watching you have sex, like weird stuff like that too.
Yes. So like, for instance, one thing that I've been processing how to work on with celibate gay people, for example, is I think one of the biggest things of like the integration of faith and sexuality is our feeling of embodiment. Like how you feel that your body isn't just something you like live inside of, but that you are. Like this is me, and I, from my skin to like from my head to my toes is me, and I feel at home in my body. I'll be honest, like in my own experience, sex really helped me to feel that. I think sex is often very helpful for people to find that feeling of at home because it's connected to pleasure. It's connected to a lot of different things, connection, intimacy. There's so many things. And so one of the things I've struggled to help, I've definitely found some unique ways to do it, But how do you have someone who has maybe been abstinent their whole life or is committed to celibacy? How do they find that in a way that's not already built in shame, but like actually built in a feeling of dignity and at homeness, when so much of that often in our world gets very tied to sex?
Yeah.
And I think there definitely are different things which maybe some time to talk about, but I think that's like where the values of what purity culture like sees as the objective of just like don't have bad, like sex that's immoral. Because once you get married, you can do whatever you want as long as you're straight. But they don't actually value like embodiment or dignity or like,
or even teaching things like consent.
Yes. God forbid.
Or that sometimes sex doesn't feel great, especially if this is your first time. It might be painful, but like these poor women, they're married, they have sex for the first time, and it's like so miserable, so painful or traumatic, and there's no like understanding of why the other person's not taught how to like support or hold. And so I think like, I'm not saying that people should be taught to like do whatever you want to and just like whatever. I'm not saying that, but I think like even if someone is wanting to stay abstinent, whatever, like it's still important to have the education.
Yeah. 100%. And I think also then in that, because sadly the one part is often purity culture actually does push people when they finally leave it to go out and be like, I'm going to have all the sex possible.
Well, I even remember like when I came out, I was like, I think I probably even talked to you about this of like, I almost feel like now I have to go and like go on tons of dates and like sleep with a lot of people. Like I feel like now that I'm out, that's what I have to do because I'm gay now. Because there also was a message fed to me growing up before I even realized I was queer that like queer people are hypersexual. And so I was like, does this mean that I'm going to have to be also? Like, where did I pick that up from? And I think that's part of purity culture too, of like, Well,
I mean, that was definitely one of we were talking about this earlier, that, there's a message in purity culture that men are just like sex animals. And so already I think even if you're a straight man, you're built into this idea of like men just want sex. And of course, like I want to acknowledge people, like obviously there's statistical work that shows like men are more sex driven than women. Yes.
But your men are growing up being taught that it's like it's
almost not to an extreme though.
Yeah. And I feel like it's almost like taking away the power. It's like you actually can't help yourself.
Yeah. And then I think what happened for me was that you're already like have this idea that men don't want intimacy. Men just want to get off. And then when you're attracted to other men, your desires are seen as unnatural. So then it just becomes like intimacy and emotional connection and love are just not even possible with another man. And then the ex-gay movement really pushed this idea that when you feel like really super hyper drawn to another person of the same sex, that's emotional dependency. And what's sad about that is I think that there's ways that it acknowledged definitely a piece of unhealth, maybe not a great place to stay, but like infatuation, it's a stage.
Yeah.
It's
also
okay.
Like it's human.
Yeah, like the first time you ever like have that connection, it feels like the newest thing ever. Now, granted, you don't live there,
right? That new relationship energy feeling.
Yes, like you don't live there, the honeymoon stage.
Yeah,
but it's also like a natural part. But I remember when I would have friendships with guys, and the moment I would feel that, like just thinking about them all the time, I was like, oh, I can't share this with people in my church because they're gonna say. Like, it wasn't even like, they're going to say. I was like, they're going to realize that I'm emotionally dependent.
Yeah.
And rather than space to work through that, I think I just got caught into this thing of like, all I'm able to do is either be a sex-crazed animal or I have overly dependent, like I need to just trust in God. And I couldn't actually develop intimacy with other men. So.
Yeah, and that feels sad. Because like intimacy is a really beautiful part of being human.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm just talking about like deep connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you want to watch one of the videos that I sent you really quickly?
Ugh.
Did you
Yes, I want to
mention?
watch it to talk about, but
We
craziness.
don't actually. Do you remember what it is? Because I can
No,
just put it
you
in.
should.
Okay. All right.
It's so quick. It's a reel. It's like a minute long.
Okay.
You want to know why America's losing? They don't have pastors and leaders like your leader told me. You don't have a bunch of pastors that are willing to preach the truth. If we just had 10 pastors like your pastor, this nation would not be the same. But we have a bunch of gay, effeminate pastors who don't want to preach the truth. I call them the effeminate, gay, spiritual pastors. You see, there's the gay guys. Hey, guys. There's the real gay guys, and then there's the spiritually gay guy. The spiritually gay guy is worse than the gay guy. Because the gay guy knows that doesn't believe in God. The spiritually gay guy thinks he's a man going to heaven, but he's actually stuck in a gay spiritual body.
A spiritually gay body. There's...
I feel like if I was in that congregation listening, I'd be like, what the... like,
what?
laugh.
What? Yeah.
What?
I mean, like, first of all, it's just, like, ridiculous. But I love where he says that he's in a spiritually gay body. I'm like, what does that mean?
It's almost like when people just spit out buzzwords that don't make any sense, but it gets people going. That's what it feels like. That's
where I have a hard time on like whether to address this kind of stuff, because part of it feels like you say this kind of stuff because you know then people are going to respond.
Yeah, which you heard the people in the audience
reacting. Well, and then on top of it, you're going to post it to social media and then, all press is good press, and then you're going to get a lot of people mad at you.
Yeah, like rage bait.
And rage bait. I mean, it's one of the reasons why there's like some specific like critics that I just like won't reference often. Yeah. Because I'm not going to give them time. But I thought that this one embodied a lot of what we've been talking about, because it's this kind of, well, first of all, it's this equating of being gay to like, he's talking about as like not speaking the truth, like being weak, and I'm like, oh, honey, I think I talk on like more complex topics than you. But, and then the whole idea
being
of
a gay man is not as dangerous as being a gay spiritual
because the idea is that the gay man knows that he's not going to heaven or something, and I'm like, well, speak for yourself.
Yeah.
One of the things that I realized when I was processing my experience in conversion therapy was that one of the reasons why, and I think I talked about this in my briefing, my amicus brief for the Supreme Court, of one of the reasons why I think that conversion therapy is dangerous for youth, and I think especially during the purity culture movement, is that there's these kinds of framings where like the way he talked about gay people is like, to be gay is to not be a Christian.
Yeah.
Like to live the gay lifestyle is to go out and have sex and do drugs and all of this stuff. And then then the other one agenda. Is like the gay agenda.
Whatever that agenda is.
Like, we are not that coordinated to actually have that.
There's like secret meetings maybe going on. I haven't been invited to any.
I was taught that in X, like that there's this whole coordinated thing. And I'm like, maybe some people are, but the general idea is like,
we're just trying to live our normal life.
Yes.
That's all.
But then you were told that like being a Christian is to reject the gay lifestyle, to reject all of it. So you're told this binary that actually doesn't exist. It's so much more complex than that. And I think that that's what happens. Like, he's not even saying, the problem is that it's not like those are things that people necessarily always say, but it's like embedded into the way that people speak and the implications that they are projecting by what they're saying.
Imagine like being a young queer person in that congregation, sitting there, you're going to go home and think, well, apparently I'm not even a Christian. Yeah. That would have set off my OCD teenage brain like spiral. And now I would not want to share with anyone in that church after listening to that, because I'd be so afraid to. So really it keeps people quiet. And it's sad,
Yeah.
Like, we could listen to that and both of us would like roll our eyes and move on. But many people that would like,
Yeah. And I think that there is something about what for me has been most transformative of like leaving kind of like the effects of conversion therapy and purity culture and all that, because in my brain they're just like all tied together, is the ability to find that honesty with people that I do life with. You know, it's so funny. I preached tonight, which if anyone wants to go listen, apparently it was a great sermon.
It was really good. I actually feel like it works really well with even what we're talking about here.
So go to the Providencia WPB podcast and check it out. If you desire. It was on Pentecost and the generous landowner. But I talked about being side B and being gay and a lot of these different things. And it's still nervous for me. It's still nerve-wracking for me to talk about this at our church. And I was telling someone tonight after church when they were like coming up and saying kind words about it, is I think the hardest part is I can stand in front of an audience, God knows where in the world, and talk about sexuality all day long. And I can talk in our community about anything. What's scary for me, and I'm still processing it because I felt it tonight, was like there's a feeling of if I'm honest about this, either the celibacy part or the gay part or whatever, the potential rejection feels a bigger deal here because it's the place I'm invested in, because of it, you know, and it's not always, I know the people that are our community love me, you know, like, but it's like, oh, who's going to show up and who, you know, but I think it's actually been healthy for me to decide I want to still move forward. I want to still try it. And maybe I don't always have to preach, and I also don't always have to talk about sexuality, but my willingness to come back and like be honest and then to have that within our community has been the most freeing thing. Yeah. And like healing thing for me from purity culture.
For sure. Yeah. I'm so grateful that you do share.
Yeah. I'm so grateful you share.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's interesting now because I am affirming, and so I am like dating and such, and it's fascinating how many queer people I meet that have so much trauma from purity culture,
oh my God,
from religion.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's sad to see. I think it's interesting that the man who wrote the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye later came out and apologized for it, and he actually, like, I think those books aren't being, I mean, obviously if they're already existing, they're existing, but I'm pretty sure they're not printing
they're not
anymore.
In print anymore, I don't think.
He's like written an apology, and a lot of people from then, not a lot of people, but some people have seen like the harm, you know, or seeing like, okay, there's nothing wrong with doing abstinence-based stuff, but we also need to include like actual education. But it does seem like there's a bigger uprising, even within like the manosphere of like, I'm hearing men, Andrew Tate vibes, like women that are virgins, but then the man is sleeping with a lot of people. So it's like, who are they sleeping with if they want women? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So you still hear that a lot, and the shame is still there a lot.
I mean, even like ex-gay stuff has like arisen again, and it's you would not think that it would be gaining that much traction in today's world.
You'll need to look into the Moral Majority and Heritage Foundation, and all of that is so connected.
Did you ever watch the miniseries Mrs. America?
No.
That's totally worth it. Kate Blanchett.
I feel like I don't ever watch TV except when I'm with you.
We need to watch it.
I don't even have a TV.
It's like 8 episodes or something, but it's about gosh, what's her name? Kate Blanchett, I think it is, plays this one woman who played a big role in the rise of the moral majority. And her whole thing was preaching about women need to be in the home and all of that, and how she took down the ERA. Because the ERA was going to become an amendment to the Constitution. And it looked like it was all poised to do so, and it was going to be the next amendment. And then she really brought it down, and it never became an amendment. It's crazy. Yeah.
So I think all of that is causing a rise in like this stuff again.
Yes.
Which is hard because it's like you just need to ask the millennials how it worked out.
Seriously. You know, you would think that something would just stay dead, but...
And also I was thinking about it with purity culture and abstinence and everything. I think what's really hard is it's almost like, it makes me think of like the tree of life versus knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
Of like, instead of seeing it as like, almost like how far can I go and it still count, you know? And that's where you see, I forget what it's called. It's in
Mormon culture?
Yes, that's what I was trying to think
yeah,
of.
soaking.
Yeah. Or even like I've heard like some like, you know, it's like what actually counts as sex? Am I still a virgin? It's like, girl, you did everything. Like, are we just really like the letter of the law versus like
the spirit of the law?
You know,
and
I mean, technically, you could see like, I mean, a lot of gay people could be like, I'm technically still a virgin, depending on what you know definition you're using. But it's like these teens. I remember like I wasn't because I was not realizing I was gay at the time, but my friends were like doing everything but like actual penetration, and they still were like, oh, I still am waiting for marriage.
I mean, listen, I'm not here to shame like people, and I have no room to talk about like critiquing people for what they've done or what they've not done.
Yeah, and I honestly, it doesn't. I don't have a thing.
But
in
it's
it either.
the idea of like when you've ingrained so much in your mind that it's based on a boundary.
Yeah,
the ways that you will find to go forward. That was why for me a while ago I just threw out the idea of like, where is the line?
Yeah,
and I was like, I don't care,
because I have friends that know I have friends that are celibate, and they're like, what are they allowed to do? What they're not allowed to do? And I'm like, first of all, I don't know. I'm not going to ask. Second of all, even if I did know, I'm not going to spread people's business around. But I think it's like, how far could we go and it's still, we're still okay, which is operating out of that like shame instead of like,
instead of going like, what, for me, like one of the biggest things is like, what calls me to be celibate, and therefore how do I live that out in its most intentional way, rather than, oh, these like things are bad, but like whatever it is, that's not the whole thing. And it's
soaking. I forgot. I couldn't think of the word. You knew exactly what I was talking about.
I know some celibate gay people that that has been a thing, and that's part of the people go through all of the different ways, and it's the journey towards finding a different way, but it's crazy. Oh my God. Okay, I know we could sit here forever.
I know. I don't even know how long we've been talking or what time it is.
It's been an hour.
Oh, wow.
Or close to it. So, any last words before we close this out?
I just hope, if somebody listened to this and they are, whether they are waiting for marriage or they are celibate or whatever, like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think in talking about purity culture, I just want to make sure it's not seeming like I'm shaming people for wanting to be pure, but really it's like that shame that people are starting to process now. I see it in clients, and also the reminder of like, you're not handing out dead flowers to people,
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's the shame, and it's also the intention of like,
and the worth and all of that.
And the idea of like, when we talk about formation, what are we talking about? Are you just saying to behave correctly?
Yeah. Or how far can you go and it still count as you're good?
Or
like, is it like the spirit of like,
heart?
Is this bringing me closer to Christ? Am I holding on to my own values? The embodiment aspect, I think that is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Connection to others.
Yeah.
These pieces, because that I think will actually hit on some deeper things and allow a lot more space for the complexity of how we get there.
Yeah.
Because this is why I've seen a lot of different people who are celibate you say that they are pursuing celibacy rather than saying I am celibate.
Yeah.
Because the idea is like, to say I am celibate is to say like, oh, I'm just like not having sex and I'm doing it. Whereas the wording of pursuing celibacy, it's not just like, oh, it gives leniency to in case you're like not perfect at it, but I think it's pushing the idea of an objective, of something that you're working towards, and like, what is that deeper meaning of celibacy?
Yeah.
And all of those things, which if you want to read more about, when I have my book, I think I'm just going to be for the next year.
As you should. It's really good.
Thank you.
I read it.
Thank you.
Skimmed it.
Yes.
Late at night.
Rachel's one of the first people to read it.
When I heard that some of his friends made the book, I'm like, I have to read this right now to see if I'm in it.
You did find one of the mentions of you.
I did. Don't cut it.
I won't.
Please.
I won't. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you all for listening. There's going to be more stuff coming through the Patreon, the Substack. I'm finally going to get back on that now that this whole season is done of my life. Things are still a little bit crazy because, like I said, my house is a mess right now and staying with friends. So I appreciate all of your grace. But more things coming down the line. Rachel's going to be back. We're going to talk about so much.
Did y'all listen to the sermon?
Yes, go
on the
over and listen to
Providencia
the
podcast
sermon.
because it was good.
Thanks. Yes,
Yeah.
it should be up the same day as this one. So cool. All right, everyone. Go to patreon.com/Holy Ourselves if you want to support the podcast by becoming a patron. Go to Substack to subscribe to the monthly newsletter, which will finally be restarting now that I've finished the first draft of the book. And you can also go on the website, holyourselves.org, for spiritual direction, cohorts. There's also a place you can do a speak pipe. You can send in a voice note if you want to send in a voice note to one of mine and Rachel's episodes.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Ask a question, maybe on this, maybe on something else. You can do so there. And we just appreciate you all. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening.
Bye everyone.